Welcome to Elena, Storyteller, a place where novels, love stories, social psychology, and timeless sayings are retold with deep emotions. Join Elena to listen, empathize, and embark on the emotional journey of today's story.
Next, Elena invites readers to read the novel Me Before You, Jojo Moyes. Chapter 1, The Fateful Encounter. The morning in that small town unfolded like any other. The rain-soaked cobblestone street glistened, the faint aroma of freshly baked bread drifted from the shop across the road, and the elderly neighbors exchanged their habitual nods of greeting as they passed. For most, this town was the embodiment of peace. For Louisa Clark, it felt like a sealed box, its four walls enclosing her life, with no way out she could ever imagine. Lou hurried along, her worn high heels clicking sharply on the pavement. She wrapped herself in her yellow and black checkered coat, an outfit her sister had once dismissed as a fashion disaster. Yet Lou adored it as though it were part of her own skin. It made her feel different, distinct in a town where everyone else seemed to blend into muted, safe colors. But today, unlike any other, her steps felt heavier. The Buttered Bun, the cafe where she had worked for 6 years, had closed its doors the night before. The wooden sign had been taken down. Lou still remembered the hasty embrace from her boss, Frank, and his choked words. "Thank you, Lou. If I could, I would have kept you." Unemployed. The word tolled in her head like a relentless bell. She thought of her father, still struggling to find work at the factory, her mother caring tirelessly for her grandfather, and her sister Trina, raising little Thomas on her own. The Clarks were a family forever stretched thin by their modest income, and now the weight of responsibility bore down on Lou harder than ever. The cramped employment office offered no comfort. 4 gray walls, the smell of old paper and disinfectant, a few cold plastic chairs. Lou sat opposite a middle-aged woman in glasses who was scanning a list of available jobs. Lou had been here many times before, each visit ending in menial offers, cleaning, waitressing, or retail. But this time, the woman glanced up, hesitation flickering in her eyes. There is another position. A wealthy family is looking for someone to care for a disabled gentleman. It's not medical work. They already have nurses. What they need is someone who can bring some cheer, some company. Would you be interested? Lou froze. She had never imagined herself in such a role, never thought she could face illness or disability so directly. But when the woman mentioned the pay more than double what she had earned before, Lou's heart constricted. She thought of the unpaid bills, the rent, Trina's tuition fees, and then she nodded. The day of the interview arrived under a heavy gray sky, the cold wind biting at her skin. Lou followed the winding road that led to a grand stone house, tall and old. The black iron gates gleamed, the emerald lawns were trimmed to perfection. Everything exuded a wealth she had never touched. Her heart pounded, her shoes scraping softly against the gravel as she approached the door. The woman who answered was Mrs. Camilla Traynor, tall, composed, her face set in cool elegance, her fine sweater and polished gestures betraying an innate refinement. Her gaze swept over Lou, lingering briefly on her red floral dress and scuffed shoes. She said nothing, save for a curt, "Come in." The house was so quiet Lou could hear her own heels tapping against the wooden floor. Mrs. Traynor led her into a sunlit room with wide windows overlooking the garden. There sat a young man in a modern wheelchair. His hair was thick and dark, slightly tousled, his face handsome yet taut with strain. The way he sat motionless, only his eyes shifting, caught at Lou's breath. "Will Traynor." He turned his head toward her, glanced for the briefest second, then returned his gaze to the world outside the window. Lou tried to smile, her voice trembling. "Hello, I'm Louisa Clark." "So, you're my new clown then?" Will said, his mouth twisting into a half-smile, half-sneer. Lou's cheeks flamed. She became painfully aware of her bright dress, her shabby shoes. To him, she must have looked utterly ridiculous. She stammered something incoherent, while Will gave a short, dry laugh, not one of amusement, but of derision. Their first meeting was over almost as quickly as it began. Mrs. Traynor outlined the job, stressing that no medical skills were needed, only patience and good humor. Lou nodded, but her mind wandered, snagged on Will's gaze, eyes shadowed, as though a clouded sky had stolen their light. As she stepped out of the house, Lou let out a long breath of relief, and yet something strange stirred within her. She turned her head. Through the polished glass, Will's figure remained, still, unyielding, staring outward as though the world had abandoned him. For an instant, Lou felt a heaviness seep into her heart. She could not know then that this decision, taken simply for the sake of survival, would open a path that would change everything. And in that fleeting moment, when their eyes met, the first thread was spun, weaving a story both tender and heartbreakingly full of tears. Chapter 2: The Wall of Ice. On her first day of work, Lou woke earlier than usual. The faint light of dawn filtered through the thin curtains of her small room, falling across the faded floral blanket. She sat up, her eyes resting for a moment on the pair of neatly placed shoes by the bed. Those old shoes had carried her through countless days at the cafe, and now they would carry her into a world entirely unknown. Breakfast at the Clark household was as hurried and noisy as ever. Her father frowned over the newspaper, a headline about factory layoffs glaring from the page. Her mother busied herself with the teapot, her grandfather coughed harshly on the sofa, and Trina juggled a slice of toast with soothing little Thomas. Amidst these familiar sounds, Lou felt the weight of an invisible burden pressing down on her. She forced a smile, hiding the gnawing thought, what if I can't keep this job? When the rickety bus rumbled away from the stop, Lou sat by the window, her heartbeat uneven. The trainer's house soon loomed into view, just as imposing and cold as it had been on interview day. The iron gates opened with a metallic groan, and the crunch of gravel under the wheels made her feel like an intruder stepping into a foreign, glittering domain. Camilla Trainer received her with the same austere expression. Her instructions were clipped, almost like commands: mealtimes, medication, the nurse in charge, and above all, things to avoid. He can be difficult. Don't take it personally. The words landed somewhere between a warning and a challenge. Lou took a deep breath before opening the sunlit door. Will sat there, upright in his wheelchair, still as stone, his face carved into an expression of unyielding resolve. His eyes flicked over her with such cold detachment that Lou felt herself reduced to a speck of dust. "Good morning," Lou said brightly, forcing a smile. Will raised an eyebrow. "Yours or mine?" His voice was low, sharp, edged with bitterness. Lou faltered. She had meant to say something cheerful, but her lips refused to move. Will turned his face away, staring out at the garden bathed in pale light. He made no further gesture, no further sound. The silence pressed in, suffocating. The hours that followed dragged. Lou tried to make conversation, telling him about her cafe boss, about the ridiculous dresses she had once worn. Will's replies never stretched beyond a curt yes, a dismissive or at best, a thin smile laced with mockery. Lou felt like a clown fumbling through a performance for an audience that refused to care. Mid-morning, Nathan the nurse arrived, tall, broad-shouldered, his voice warm and steady. He cared for Will with practiced patience. Lou stood by, watching. She noticed how Will deliberately made everything difficult, from taking his medication to the smallest movement, as though determined to prove he needed no one. Nathan, unfazed, responded with quiet good humor. Lou, however, bristled. She could not fathom how a man still so young, once blessed with everything, could choose to become a block of unyielding ice. By the day's end, Lou stepped outside, exhaustion weighing on her. Relief washed through her lungs at being freed from the suffocating air inside, yet unease lingered. One thought echoed, how long can I endure this? The following days brought little change. Will's demeanor remained frozen, his sarcasm sharp enough to wound. He had built a wall of stone, impenetrable, keeping everyone, including himself, shut away from the world. Lou countered with her silly stories, her flamboyant dresses, even clumsy attempts at humor. The result was always the same, that same blank, implacable stare. One afternoon, when Lou asked whether he'd like to hear some music, Will replied flatly, "Play whatever you like, all I'll hear is pity." The words struck her like a knife. Lou stood silent, her lips pressed tight. In that moment, she realized his bitterness was not aimed solely at others. It was aimed at himself. And yet, Lou returned each morning. There was something in Will's eyes, fleeting, but there, that kept her from walking away. Beyond the anger, beyond the sarcasm, she glimpsed pain, a depth of loss he tried so hard to hide behind his icy facade. Lou told herself, if she had chosen this job, she would find a way to crack that wall, even if only by the smallest fissure. Outside, the little town turned as it always did. But inside that sunlit room, between two people who seemed to share nothing at all, a fragile, almost invisible thread was slowly beginning to form. Chapter 3: The Green Days. The first weeks passed in heaviness. Every morning, Lou carried with her a tiny hope that today Will would be different, that he might say something kind, or at least look at her a little longer. But most of what she received were indifferent glances, cutting sarcasm, or a silence so thick it froze the room. Lou began to think she would give up. She was not strong-willed by nature, and she was certainly not accustomed to enduring scorn. But each time she returned home, seeing her parents struggling, hearing Trina arguing with their mother about tuition, watching her grandfather coughing in the corner, Lou clenched her teeth and went back. This job was the family's only lifeline. One rainy afternoon, while Lou sat reading a magazine by the window, Will suddenly spoke. "Do you plan to sit there until I rot?" Startled, Lou looked up. In the pale light, his eyes seemed brighter, sharper. Summoning courage from nowhere, she retorted, her voice a little sharp. "If you won't talk, what else am I supposed to do?" Will froze, then let out a brief laugh. For the first time, it wasn't entirely bitter. Lou felt her heart tremble. In that moment, the icy wall between them seemed to crack, just a little. From that day on, the air between them began to change, though slowly. Lou tried telling him silly stories about customers at her old cafe, about the eccentric dresses she had stitched together, even about getting stuck in a phone booth because the door jammed. Will listened, sometimes with a smirk, sometimes with teasing remarks. "You're a walking accident, Louisa Clark." But there was a hint of warmth in his voice now, no longer the biting chill of before. Nathan, the caregiver, seemed to notice the change as well. One morning, when Will was asleep, Nathan leaned toward Lou and whispered, "You're doing well. He's been laughing more. I haven't seen that in a long time." Those words made Lou glow inside, as though someone had given her new strength. She began thinking of small plans to coax Will out of that room. At first, it was difficult. Will always brushed her off. "Crowds suffocate me. I have no interest in trivial outings." But Lou was patient, mixing persistence with a childlike stubbornness. And finally, on a rare sunny day, Will agreed to let her take him to the park nearby. That day etched itself into Lou's memory. Green lawns stretched out, children ran about, and music drifted faintly from a distance. Will sat in his chair, eyes narrowing at the sunlight, his face tight as though venturing outside was a punishment. Lou, pushing his chair, chattered endlessly, trying to wash away the awkwardness. "See, no one's looking at you. Everyone's busy with their own lives." Will pressed his lips together in silence. But when a small boy ran past and grinned at him, Lou saw the corner of Will's mouth twitch. A smile, fleeting but real. From the park, they ventured further. Once to a classical concert, once to dinner at a restaurant. Each trip came with challenges, inaccessible paths, the curious stares of strangers, or sudden waves of pain that racked Will's body. Once he snapped. "You don't get it, Lou. Sitting here like a corpse for people to gawk at. I'd rather stay home." Lou stayed quiet, but her hand tightened around his. "If you stay home forever, you'll forget what the world is like, and you'll never smile." Will looked at her for a long time, then sighed. "You're stubborn, you know that." In those months, Lou felt her own life changing. Before, her world had been only the small town, the cafe, her family. Now, each day with Will felt like a new adventure. He encouraged her to read books, watch foreign films, listen to music beyond the old tunes on the radio. "You have to broaden your mind, Louisa. Don't lock yourself in a tiny box." She laughed. "You say it like I could fly away tomorrow." "Because you could. You just don't dare yet." Gradually, Lou realized she wasn't only helping Will to live again, she herself was awakening. Every smile he gave, every warm glance, was like a light revealing a path she had never seen. At night, lying on her small bed, Lou stared at the ceiling, her heart racing. She wondered, was she falling in love with him, the man both untouchable and fragile? And if so, where could such love lead when his future was bound to a wheelchair? She wasn't ready to face the answer. But one thing was certain. From the day Will smiled at her, their days had been dyed green, fresh, beautiful, and utterly different. Chapter 4: The Painful Secret. Time passed, and the atmosphere between Lou and Will had changed so much that even Lou herself was surprised. The heavy, oppressive days at the start had slowly given way to rare, warm moments. In the mornings, when sunlight spilled through the window pane, Lou would pull up a chair beside Will and tell him silly stories about her old cafe boss, or about Trina's latest argument with their mother after forgetting to shut the chicken coop. Will never laughed aloud, but his eyes lit up, and the corner of his mouth would lift slightly. For Lou, that alone was enough to make her feel light for the whole day. She grew accustomed to making plans, taking Will to the park, taking him to a film, even trying dinner at a restaurant. Each outing brought its own complications: the awkward paths, the curious stares of strangers, Will's sudden pain. But Lou never gave up. She always found ways to make him feel that he still belonged to the world, that there was still a place for him in other people's joy. Lou kept telling herself, "He's coming back to life. If I'm patient enough, he won't be so desperate anymore." But one late spring evening, as she passed the library in the big house, Lou's life veered in another direction. The door was ajar, and through the gap she heard Camilla Trainor's hoarse voice. "We promised him, Stephen, 6 months. Just 6 months and then he'll go." Mr. Trainor did not answer at once. There was a long silence, broken only by the sound of wind through the window. Then his voice came heavy. "I still can't accept it. He's young, Camilla. How can we let our son?" Lou didn't hear the rest. Her head spun. Go, 6 months, her heart hammered against her ribs. She stepped back quietly, then ran to the changing room, her chest a storm. That whole night she barely slept. Fragments of memory flashed. Will's fragile smiles, his bitter remarks, Camilla Trainor's steady, warning eyes. They all fused into a terrible picture she didn't want to believe. A few days later, unable to bear it, Lou sought Nathan out. They sat in the hallway where the sunlight lay pale across the floor. Lou's voice trembled. "Nathan, about Will, is he planning something?" Nathan hesitated. He glanced around, then sighed, as if releasing a burden he'd carried for too long. "You found out. Yes, Will has made his decision. 6 months from the day you started working here, he'll go to Switzerland. There's a legal assisted dying clinic there." Lou froze. Her mouth opened, but her throat was dry, no words came. At last, her voice cracked. "But he's getting better. He's going out, he's laughing, I've seen him change." Nathan laid a hand on her shoulder, his eyes sorrowful. "Lou, what you're seeing is only on the surface. Every day, Will's body is a battlefield. The pain, the helplessness, nothing is like it used to be. He once lived at full tilt, mountaineering, riding motorbikes, traveling the world. Now he can't even lift a glass of water. To him, living like this is unacceptable. And his mind, made up. Will's will, you know how hard that is to shift." Tears welled in Lou's eyes. She turned away, not wanting Nathan to see her break, but her trembling shoulders betrayed everything. That night she cried herself empty. Her heart felt as though someone had squeezed it in a fist. She had believed that friendship, or perhaps even love, could be strong enough to keep Will here. But it turned out he had prepared for his ending long before she had stepped into his life. The next day, Lou gathered her courage and faced Will. She entered his room, her face tight. "Why didn't you tell me? Why hide it from me?" Will turned to look at her, his eyes deep, calm to the point of infuriating her. "Because it's my business, Louisa, my decision." Lou's voice shook. "But you have me now. You've been laughing, you've gone out. Why do you still want to die?" Will was silent, so long that Lou thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, each word low but resolute. "Lou, I know how hard you're trying. I know you want to save me. But I don't want you to become the reason I drag out this existence. I don't want to live just so you can see me breathing. I had a wonderful life, and now it's gone. I can't be the man I used to be. I don't want you looking at me with pity." Tears slid down Lou's face. She rushed to him, clasping his hand, whispering, "No, I'll make you happy. I'll prove this life is still worth living. Just give me time." Will closed his eyes. For a moment, his face softened, as though his heart was wavering. But then he turned away, looking out the sunlit window, saying nothing. That image burned into Lou, Will's still silhouette in the golden light, at once near and impossibly distant. She realized, in that instant, she had entered a battle. A battle not only against Will's despair, but also against time itself, counting down day by day. She began making a list: trips, new experiences, things Will might want to try one last time. She would take him anywhere, do anything within her power. If there was even the faintest chance, Lou would turn it into reality. Inside her heart, a silent vow echoed. "I will keep you here, whatever it takes." Chapter 5, The Last Journey. Lou had never felt time pass so quickly. Every morning when she woke, she counted down in her head. 5 months left, 4 months, less than a summer. Each number felt like a knife to the heart. But instead of collapsing, Lou chose action. She began drafting a long list and taped it across her bedroom wall. Things Will could do, places they could visit, experiences that might reignite the joy of being alive. Some were simple, like watching a film at an open-air cinema. Others were daring, like flying in a hot air balloon. Lou resolved to turn these 6 months into the most memorable stretch of Will's life, and she realized of hers too. At first, Will resisted. "Louisa, you don't have to waste your energy. My decision is made." But Lou only smiled, holding his hand firmly. "You once promised to give me a chance to change your mind, so let me try. You don't get to break your promise now." Will studied her for a long moment, then sighed, his eyes glimmering with something both tender and unbearably sad. He neither nodded nor shook his head. For Lou, that was enough. The small journeys. They began with little things. One evening, Lou took Will to the town square, where an old film flickered across a giant outdoor screen. She spread a blanket on the grass, bought popcorn and soda. As the screen lit up and the night breeze brushed her cheek, Lou glanced at Will. His eyes were fixed on the story unfolding, glowing softly in the reflected light. Another time, Lou brought him to the zoo. She darted about excitedly like a child, pointing out giraffes and the mischievous monkeys. Will chuckled. "You're ridiculous, Clark. Who takes a crippled guy to the zoo for fun?" Lou tilted her chin. "At least you're not in the monkey cage. I'd call that a success." The moments were small, but each smile from Will felt like proof that her plan was working. The big journey. By summer, Lou dared to plan something bolder, a long trip to the sea. She secretly conspired with Nathan, then pleaded with the trainers. At first, Camilla hesitated. "Will it be safe, Louisa?" Lou clasped her hands tightly, her voice firm. "We don't have much time. At least give him one real summer." They chose a resort abroad, where beaches stretched with white sand and the sea shimmered blue and endless. On the day of departure, Lou barely slept, torn between excitement and worry. On the plane, she fussed over Will, checking his comfort, asking Nathan endless questions, while Will remained strangely calm. His head rested back, eyes closed, as though savoring the rare escape from the house that had become his prison. When they arrived, Lou was stunned. Palm trees swaying, waves whispering endlessly, sunlight blazing across the horizon. She turned to Will just in time to catch the faint curve of his lips. That single hint of a smile was worth everything. The next morning, Nathan wheeled Will across the sand. Lou walked barefoot beside them, narrating every detail. A crab scuttling sideways, the salty tang in the air, the wide, unbroken sky. The glint of sunlight on the water reflected in Will's eyes, and Lou's heart tightened painfully. That evening, they dined under candlelight, with the sound of waves as their music. Lou wore a bright floral dress she had never dared to put on back home. Will gazed at her for a long moment before murmuring, "You look beautiful, Clark." Lou flushed, her pulse racing. In his gaze, she saw something that was more than friendship, something tender, almost aching. Moments of truth. Throughout the trip, they shared more than ever. Lou spoke of her childhood, of tiny dreams she had once buried. Will recounted his past adventures, mountains conquered, oceans crossed, risks that had shaped him into someone who once lived without hesitation. One night, as they sat on the balcony watching the sea, Lou gathered her courage and whispered, "Will, I don't want you to go. I want you to stay, with me." Silence stretched, filled only by the rhythm of waves. At last Will turned, meeting her eyes deeply. "Louisa, you've given me more than I ever hoped for. You've made me feel human again, loved again. But it doesn't change the truth. I can't live this life in this body forever." Tears welled in Lou's eyes. Her voice trembled. "But if it's love, isn't love enough to keep you here?" Will's fingers brushed hers lightly, his gaze unbearably gentle. "Your love is the most beautiful thing that's happened to me in these final years. But sometimes love isn't enough to save someone. Remember this, Lou. I want you to live fully, not just orbit around me." A promise in her heart. On the last morning, Lou wheeled Will to the beach to watch the sunrise. The sun slowly rose over the horizon, flooding the sky with blazing pink and gold. Lou stood behind him, whispering through the lump in her throat. "Do you see it, Will? It's beautiful. The world is still so beautiful." Will nodded faintly, his eyes glistening with reflected light. He said nothing, but Lou knew. In that instant, he was fully alive with her. When they returned, Lou understood the painful truth. No matter how fiercely she fought, Will's decision would not change. Yet she also knew her love had carved an indelible mark on his heart. That alone, though not enough to keep him, would transform her forever. She clenched her fists, silently vowing, "No matter what, I'll be with him until the very end." Chapter 6. The Final Goodbye. The day she returned from the seaside trip, Lou felt her heart sink with heaviness. She had hoped that the sun-drenched moments, the laughter, and the breath of life would make Will change his mind. But in his eyes, she still saw that strange serenity, a serenity so heartbreaking, like someone already prepared to let go. The closer the fateful time came, the harder Lou tried. She talked to him for hours, laughed out loud, made up silly games to pull him out of silence. But after every smile, deep down, Lou knew she was only delaying the inevitable. The conversation with the family. One evening, Lou heard Camilla calling her into the living room. The atmosphere in the house was suffocatingly heavy. Mr. Traynor stood by the window, gripping his glass of wine, while Camilla sat upright, her eyes swollen and red. "Louisa," she said, her voice trembling but firm, "we know you've done everything you could, but Will, he still hasn't changed, and we promised him." Lou was stunned. "But why? Why would you let him do this? He's still young, he could still be happy." Camilla broke into tears, her hands shaking. "Do you think we haven't tried? We begged, we persuaded, we grew angry, but Will has the right to decide. If you love him, Louisa, let him go in peace." Those words cut through Lou's heart like a blade. She wanted to scream to fight back, but Camilla's eyes, the eyes of a desperate mother, silenced her. A private moment. That night, Lou entered Will's room. He was sitting by the window, moonlight falling across his calm face. Lou came closer, sat down, and whispered, "Are you really this determined, Will?" He nodded slightly, his eyes gentle. "Lou, I've been thinking about this for 2 years. This body is a prison, and I don't want to spend my life inside it. But these months with you have been the most beautiful I've had since the accident. You made me laugh, you made me feel human again. I don't want you to think your love wasn't enough. It was enough to change me, just not enough to keep me here." Lou broke into tears, burying her face against his shoulder. Will let her cry, his frail hand resting on her hair, as though offering his last comfort. The final journey. On the fateful day, the sky was gray. Lou traveled with the Traynors and Nathan to Switzerland. The whole way, she clutched Will's hand, as if letting go would make him vanish. The clinic grounds were quiet, filled with the scent of lavender. Everything was so peaceful, so gentle, it made Lou want to scream. Why is it this easy? Why can someone leave the world as if slipping into sleep? In the small room, bathed in soft golden light, Will asked for a few minutes alone with Lou. When it was just the two of them, he smiled, weak but warm. Louisa Clark, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you for coming, for giving me these final months that weren't only shadows. Tears streamed down Lou's face. She gripped his hand. Don't go, Will. Please don't leave me. He shook his head, his eyes filled with both pain and resolve. Don't live for me, Lou. Live for yourself. Travel, learn something new, love someone wholeheartedly. And when you're faced with a choice, always choose the biggest life you can. That's the last gift I can give you. Lou could only sob in answer. She leaned down, pressing her lips to his in a long, tear-stained kiss. In that moment, time seemed to stop, only two hearts beating as one. Then Will whispered, I love you, Louisa Clark. After the storm. When it was over, Lou felt almost hollow. The world kept turning, but inside her was a vast silence. In the days that followed, she drowned in grief, anger, despair. But then, in the Will left behind, she found a letter written to her. In it, Will urged her to use the money he left to begin a new life. He wrote that he believed in her, that she deserved a world far larger than the small walls around the cafe. Lou folded the letter, tears wetting the smile now forming on her lips. He was gone, but the love he left behind would remain a guiding flame. The farewell. One early autumn morning, Lou sat in a small cafe, watching people pass by. Her heart still ached at the thought of Will, but in her eyes there was something new, hope. She whispered, as though speaking to herself, as though sending her words into the wind. Will, I will live. I will live for both of us. And with that promise, Lou stepped into a new journey, a journey without him beside her, but with him forever in her heart.
Thank you so much for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to support Elena, storyteller, and stay tuned for the next heartfelt video.